have them quickly introduce themselves and make sure that their microphones are working first. Also from our Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, we have Matthew Lee. Matt, are you there?
I am, thank you.
Great. From the Chicago Department of Transportation, we have Mike Simon. Mike, are you on?
Yes, I am, Isaac.
Great, thank you. From the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, we have Jennifer Washington. Jen, are you on?
I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Great. From the Chicago Fire Department, we have Robert Steffens.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Thank you. And then we also will be joined momentarily by members from the Department of Buildings and the Chicago Department of Public Health. And they'll be on to answer all your questions related to outdoor dining. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Again, today's webinar is about the outdoor dining regulations for bars and restaurants during COVID-19. So we're going to provide an overview of the COVID-19 regulations, an overview of the outdoor guidance for safe and responsible operations. And then we want to take a bulk of this time, because we have a number of different departments with us today, we want to take a lot of this time for questions. So please, any questions that you do have, please submit them via the chat function. I'm typing in this right now. Please use the chat function for questions so that we can hopefully answer them during this webinar. It may be the case, however, that we don't get to your questions because we have a number of attendees on today, which is great, or you maybe have a very specific question that requires us to look at plans, something like that. And that is why you'll see on the bottom of every single page on this webinar, the BACP outreach at cityofchicago.org email. And I'll type that into the chat as well, so if you want to just copy and paste it. So if it is the case that we don't get to your question, or if we're unable to answer your question because we need to look something up or review plans, please send an email to that email and we will make sure to get you an answer as quickly as possible. Additionally, this webinar is being recorded, so we will be sharing it, posting it on our site afterwards. So this webinar will be recorded if you have anybody that was unable to join. Great, so we'll get started. The agenda for today's webinar. First, I'm going to provide a very brief update on the COVID-19 data metrics. I think it's very important to frame the conversation in that. Then I'm going to give a reminder of the Phase 4 guidelines. Hopefully by now, everyone on this call knows what those guidelines are, but I think it's very, very important to start out with a reminder. Then I'm going to talk about permits and licenses that are required for operating outside. Finally, I'm going to talk about structures and heating devices and any other safety considerations that you should have as a bar or restaurant when you operate outside. And I want to draw your attention to a new website that we have set up at chicago.gov/winter dining. And I'll also type that into the chat as well. This is where we have put all of our outdoor dining guidelines. All of our guidance is on this site now at chicago.gov/winter dining. So everything that is being covered today related to permits and licenses and structures and heating devices can all be found on that site. Again, that's chicago.gov/winter dining. As I said, before we really get into the bulk of the guidelines and guidance, I wanted to provide an update on the health metrics and show you a little bit where we are at on cases per day. So at the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic here in Chicago, we were at over 1,000 cases per day, as you can see back in April, May. We did get that number down very briefly below 200. But as you can see, especially over the last few weeks, we've seen a pretty worrisome rise in cases. Currently, if you go to our COVID-19 health metric dashboard, we are at about 475 new cases a day. Now, this is obviously a cause for concern. And now we're not, I'm not the COVID-19 health expert. I'm not the health department, but this is something that is obviously concerning. That is why it is so important, more important than ever, to really be doubling down on our guidelines and on your responsibilities to keeping your customers and your employees safe. Because so much of the good work that Chicago has done is because our businesses have been doing a really, really good job following the rules. And I know it's challenging. We know that it's been months and months and months, but it's really more important than ever to be doubling down on those phase 4 guidelines. Because as we said, especially over this last week, we have seen a worrisome rise in the cases. That said, case count is not the only health metric that is used to evaluate COVID-19. We're still seeing a low number of severe outcomes, hospitalizations, deaths. We're also seeing a positivity rate that is rising slightly, but is still below 5%. So, but that said, case count is above 400. It's at about 475 right now. So I just want to remind you all that we are still in the midst of this pandemic, and it's very important to be following these rules. So what are the phase 4 guidelines that are currently in place for food service and bars? And we were joined today, I just want to add, we have Aprella Johnson here from the Department of Buildings. Aprella, are you on? I want to test your microphone.
Yes, I'm here.
Great, thank you so much for joining. And again, as I said, we'll be joined by a representative from the Health Department to answer questions at the end of the presentation. So, updated phase 4 guidelines for food service and bars. You'll see that some sections are highlighted in red. That is because these are the changes that just came into effect on October 1st. I'm going to go over these quickly. We've done entire webinars on these guidelines. I just want to make sure to remind everybody of what these rules and that these rules are being enforced and will continue to be enforced into the future. Indoor service, if you have a retail food license, is allowed at 40% capacity with no more than 50 customers in a room or floor. That's up from 25% prior to October 1st. Indoor service, if you do not have a retail food license, if you're a tavern or a bar without a retail food license or a brewery, is allowed at 25% capacity with a maximum still of 50 in a room or floor. Outdoor service can continue under these outdoor dining guidelines. That means there isn't a formal capacity limit for outdoor dining, provided that you're meeting all of these different rules. And, talking from the health metrics on the last page, even as we're allowing a bit of increased indoor capacity, outdoor is still the safest way to go, which is why it's so important to be following these rules. This is the #1 violation we found. Face coverings must be worn by customers and employees, except when customers are seated and actively eating and drinking. Again, face coverings must be worn by customers and employees, except when customers are actively eating or drinking. This is very important, and we have a number of investigators on the line today too. This is the #1 thing we've seen as a violation, and it's a pretty easy violation for us. If we show up and an employee behind the counter, a waiter, a cook, has their mask below their nose, that's a violation. If customers are mingling about, standing up, moving around without a mask on, that's a violation. And to that point, next one here, all patrons must be seated while they are eating or drinking. If we see people standing and drinking, playing pool while they are drinking, anything like that, that is a violation. Additionally, if you do not have a retail food license indoors, customers cannot go up to the bar to order. If you have a tavern, a consumption on premises license without a retail food license, folks must order from their seats. We're very worried as we're reopening indoor bars that we're going to have people mingling around that bar area. Tables must be 6 feet apart with no more than 6 people per table. And if you do not have food, you must limit seating to 2 hours per party. This is whether indoor or outdoor. Establishments that serve alcohol indoors can now do so until 1 a.m. and they must close by 1:30. However, and very importantly, today is all about outdoors. Your outdoor service must still end at the time associated with your license or permit. Just because we're expanding indoors, saying you can do it till 1, there are specific rules for outdoor service that are based on your permit. So you should be following exactly what's on your permit. It's different whether you have a sidewalk cafe, expanded outdoor dining, outdoor patio permit or license, but you should be ending at the time associated with that. Cocktails to go can be sold, but they must be done so in sealed and tamper-evident containers. We're strongly recommending restaurants and bars to retain an email address and or phone number for possible contact tracing. And you must provide hand sanitizer for patrons or employees to use upon entry. Again, before we got into the details of the outdoor dining guidelines and how to be safe outdoors, we wanted to make sure to provide this update and a reminder of the Phase 4 guidelines in place, and also a call to action that it is, again, more important than ever right now as we're seeing a worrying rise in cases to be following these rules. So, as I said, I wanted to talk, as we get into the outdoor options, I wanted to talk about the different licenses or permits that can allow you to operate outside. Again, outdoor operations is still allowed. I know it's getting a little more challenging as we get colder, but it's very, very critical that these can continue operating under a proper license or permit. So first, if you have a room with a retractable roof, or if you have an indoor space near an open wall that is 50% of the wall open, that is considered outdoors, and you do not need any additional permit or license other than your existing retail food or tavern license. So if you have a wall that can open up more than 50%, that is considered outdoors, and it can be treated as an outdoor space. If you have a rooftop or a permanent outdoor patio, those are licensed as outdoor patios from BACP if they are serving alcohol. If you are not serving alcohol, you do not need an outdoor patio license for these spaces, but they must be included in the square footage of part of your retail food establishment license. If you are operating on the sidewalk, you need a sidewalk cafe permit from BACP if you are a restaurant with a retail food establishment license. If you are a liquor-only establishment that does not serve food, for the first time ever, you can operate on the sidewalk. This never used to be allowed before COVID, and you can do that with an expanded outdoor dining permit, which is a new program we created just for outdoor options during COVID-19. Finally, and again, this is also new, if you're operating on the street and/or private property temporarily in your parking lot, in a temporary patio space, something like that, you can do that. You need to be permitted as an expanded outdoor dining permit. And all of these options have the ability to extend into the fall and winter months. Sidewalk cafes are automatically issued for a full year from March 1st to February 28th. So if you have a sidewalk cafe permit, it is automatically extended until February 28th. If you have an expanded outdoor dining permit, or an EOD, we call it, that you can you just need to let us know that you're going to be extending it into the fall and winter months. If you are using structures or heating devices in your EOD or your sidewalk cafe, those elements must be added to your permit. Those site plans must be added and submitted for approval to your EOD or your sidewalk cafe permit. Sidewalk cafes, this has always existed. You need to have a site plan that displays exactly what that site looks like. You do not need to reapply for the permit to have these structures, heating devices, but you do need to have them included in you do need to submit the new plans. It's for the EOD or the sidewalk cafe. So again, I'm going to say that again. If you're using structures or heating devices, tents or any sort of heating devices, those must be added to your EOD or your sidewalk cafe site plan, but you do not need to fully reapply for the permit. Here's the contact information for how to submit the updated site plan with your structures or heating devices. And again, on the next few slides, I'm going to get into some details on what is and is not allowed for these structures and heating devices. But if you're applying for an expanded outdoor dining permit, I know this is a number of different emails, but we want to make sure to get these done. There's a number of different departments that have set this up very, very quickly, and we want to make sure to get it approved as quickly as possible. So if you are doing updated site plans for your EOD, please send these plans to all three of these emails. Write these down. I'll leave this up for a minute. chidining@cityofchicago.org, sepermits@cityofchicago.org, and c.permitsupport@cityofchicago.org. I know that's a lot to ask, and if you send it to one of those, we will get it done as well. But to make sure that this is done as quickly as possible, we ask that you email all three of these so that we can get it done really as quickly as possible. If you're looking to update your sidewalk cafe permit, please email publicwayuse@cityofchicago.org. Again, said it a few times, want to say it again. If you're using structures or heating devices, you need to update your site plans for your EOD or your sidewalk cafe. We know that there's going to be a lot more structures and heating devices out there this year because of the critical importance of outdoor dining, but we really want to make sure that it is being done safely and responsibly. The last thing we want is we have the fire department on today, is some sort of fire, some sort of issue related to your structures or heating devices. So again, if you're using an EOD or a sidewalk cafe, you need to submit those updated plans for approval, but you do not need to reapply for the permit. Great, now I'm gonna take a bit of time talking through what is and is not allowed for structures and for heating devices. So before I get into these specifics, the majority of what you see here is really existing rules for the city of Chicago that have always existed for us to make sure we're operating safely. What we've done here is kind of organize this and clarified it, and also made some changes that I'm going to talk about to make it a little bit easier. But we've always had existing rules, but we just know that it's more important than ever to be operating outside. So we wanted to make sure everything was clear and understandable. First, enclosures. Temporary outdoor structures that allow multiple parties must have at least 50% of the sides open to allow airflow if they want to be considered an outdoor space. So if you have, a large tent, a large structure that has multiple tables in it, you should have 50% of those sides open to allow airflow. Now, you can have a fully enclosed tent, a fully enclosed structure that has multiple parties, but that is considered indoor, and you must follow the indoor guidelines, meaning 25% if you're a tavern, 40% if you're a restaurant or an establishment with a retail food license. So again, if you want to be considered an outdoor space and do you want to follow the outdoor guidelines, you need to have at least 50% of the space open. Enclosed structures for individual parties, such as plastic domes, huts, things like that you've seen around the city, those can be used for individual parties, but they do need to have ventilation to make sure that you have adequate ventilation. And if you're using a plastic dome or any other enclosed space, you should have placards posted advising people that there is an increased risk of transmission within an enclosed space. So again, any sort of fully enclosed space, you should be posting something saying that there's an increased risk of transmission within that space. Tent permits, and we again have Prella Johnson from the Department of Buildings on in case people have tent permit questions. And the next slide will actually go into detail on these tent permits, so we'll hopefully answer your questions. All temporary outdoor structures that are more than 400 square feet must obtain a Department of Buildings issued tent permit. So again, more than 400 square feet, you must get a tent permit from the Department of Buildings. I'm going to go into more detail on that on the next slide. Construction, all temporary structures must be weighted, anchored, or secured to the ground. But they cannot be anchored in any method that requires screwing, cutting, or drilling into the public way, into sidewalks, into the street, into anything like that. This is an important point of clarification. Up until now, up until COVID, we have typically said no tents, no things like that on the public way. Now we've loosened that regulation a little bit. And again, we have Mike Simon from CDOT that can talk more about this. But we're now allowing tents on the public way under your expanded outdoor dining permit, but they cannot be screwed, cut, or drilled into the public way. So they need to be anchored, weighted to the ground, but they cannot be actually screwed into the ground. We don't, you'll see there's obviously many street closures around the city. Cannot have tents there that are screwed into the ground. The structures must be fire resistant certification or flame certification showing that the material is fire rated or non-combustible, and all structures must be ADA compliant. Now a little bit more on structures regarding tent permits. So if you visit the Department of Buildings website, that's chicago.gov/DOB, is a permit required? If you are 0 to 400 square feet, then no, a permit is not required. If your tent is 401 to 600 square feet, then you can get an easy permit process. And if you are 601 or more square feet, then you do need a full building permit. And we have, and again, Aprella is on from the Department of Buildings. We've extended the length of tent permits. They used to just be issued in 60-day increments. We know how important it is to have tents up. So any tent issued between June 1st of this year and June 1st of next year will last for 180 days. That is 3 times the typical length of a tent permit. Again, Aprella is on. Please use the chat if you have any questions, and we'll open it up for questions. I see a couple come in. We'll open it up for questions in just a couple minutes. Finally, I wanted to talk about heating devices. I know that there's a lot of questions here, and before I get fully into heating devices, I do just want to make it clear. I want to remind everybody that heating devices and structures do need to be submitted as part of your plans, especially if we want to make sure that we know that there's a lot of creative ideas out there, and we want to make sure that they're happening safely. That, again, we have fire on today, we have buildings on. We want to make sure that these are happening safely. So electrical devices, electrical powered heating devices are permitted. They must be installed by a licensed electrical contractor who will obtain an electrical permit through the Department of Buildings. They must be UL listed or UL classified, and they should be must be approved for outdoor use. Products that are intended for residential or household use are not appropriate. Natural gas heaters are only allowed in open and uncovered areas, and devices fueled by propane cannot be in enclosed areas. Want to draw extra attention to devices fueled by propane, that this is a large concern from the fire department as we enter these fall and winter months, that these are being done safely, which is why we want to see these plans. We want to make sure propane devices cannot be in enclosed areas. It's very, very dangerous if they are. Finally, some other general guidelines. You should be abiding by recommended safety guidelines issued with a specific product. Heating equipment should be unplugged and disconnected for overnight storage. And employees should be trained in the proper installation of fuel tanks and in detecting leaks. Enclosed areas with heating devices must have clearly marked entrances and exits. And outdoor spaces that have heating devices must keep those devices away from combustible materials such as tents at all times. Should also have clearance between the heaters and all objects, including tent size. The required minimum clearance may depend on the different heating device. 3 feet is our general recommendation, though. You should also have sufficient fire extinguishers to cover indoor and outdoor space. Now, because this heating device portion is so important, I want to make sure, Robert Steffens, I know you're on. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we open it up to questions related to the heating devices?
We want to make sure that any heating devices that are used are UL rated, which is United Laboratories rated. That means they've undergone testing and can be used for exterior usage.
Great, thank you. And now I know we wanted to spend a good amount of time on questions, and I know we got a lot of busy folks on here that are able to join. So we will now open it up for questions. I'm going to actually leave it on this slide right here as we go through questions. I want to remind everybody, chicago.gov/winter dining. First, we have a question. I believe I covered this, but I want to open this one up for Aprella. Been told by several tent companies that they will not allow tents to stay up past December 1st. So what is the plan for that? So as we said, tent permits that we're issuing will be issued for 180 days. But Aprella, can you answer that question?
Yes, we're extending it to 180 days, so it shouldn't be an issue at this point.
Great, thank you. Next, we saw a question come in for tents. Is that total tent square feet or individual tents? For example, if I have three 200 square feet tents, do I need a permit or not? So, Prella, my understanding, multiple tents are considered as one if they are all next to each other. They need to be at least 12 feet apart to avoid applying for a permit. Is that correct, Prella?
They need to be more than 12 feet. So if they're within 12 feet of one another, they're considered like a gang tent. So for the three, that's 600 square feet. And so 600 square feet actually requires a permit. So they would need to space them a little bit further apart to avoid having to apply for a permit if they're 200 square feet.
Thank you. Next, I think this is a question. Jen, I know you have to hop off in just a minute, but if you have a quick thing, can you rent an adjoining parking lot to expand your outdoor dining?
Expanded outdoor dining is allowed in adjacent parking lots to the establishment with permission of the lot owner. And we'll need written documentation saying that the owner is giving permission for outdoor dining to be installed in the parking lot.
Thank you for that. I see a question come in that's kind of more specific for the health department, and I believe the health department will be joining us in just 1 minute. They had a conflict until noon, so I'll hold that question until then. And Matt, this is a question for you. Are tents, and either Mike or Matt, are tents allowed to be used in sidewalk cafes or just in EOD areas?
So this is Matt from BACP. Tents would be permitted within the footprint of a sidewalk cafe. The structural, the posts supporting the tent would need to be entirely within the cafe. If it's outside of it, then Mike may need to weigh in on that. But if entirely within, it's permitted. As stated earlier, it just needs to be specifically updated on that site plan, indicating where it would be located and how it would be stabilized. But unless Mike Simon would have anything more to add, it would be permissive within a sidewalk cafe if updated on the site plan.
Yeah, that's correct, Matt. Nothing else to add on that.
Thank you, guys. And second, I believe Marielle from the health department has just been able to join us. Marielle, are you on?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much for joining. We had a question come in, Marielle, actually now to put you right on the spot after joining. One of our guidelines is to make it clear with a placard on an enclosed space that there's an increased risk for transmission within enclosed areas. Do you know if you guys have any sample placards, or is there any kind of suggested language for that to state the increased risk?
We don't have anything specifically like that, but the general sort of CDC social distancing guidance, those infographics might be appropriate. If we wanted to get more specific, we could draft some language for you.
Great, thank you, Marielle. So to whoever asked that question, if you send us an email to BACP Outreach, we can get at cityofchicago.org, which you'll see on the bottom of this slide. We'll make sure to get you those answers. Mike, this is a question for you. What are some examples to secure the tents onto the public way without screwing, nailing the structure down? What is the preferred, or what is any suggested securing method?
You could use the barrels or concrete blocks to weight them down. At this time, we don't want to have any drilling into the public right of way due to utilities underneath the streets right now. So it's better to use weighted concrete blocks, where you have the Jersey walls there, or some type of barrels. I mean, obviously you don't want to fill them with water in the winter because they'll freeze, but use some type of concrete block. The tent provider should be able to provide you a system to weight down your tent.
Thank you, Mike. Then,
Can I say
sorry,
something?
yeah, go ahead, Prella.
This is a Prella. All that needs to be shown on their plan. So they'll need to provide some type of structural information to show how that tent is secured, because we don't want it to blow away, of course, in this winter and it's the Windy City. So we want to make sure that's clearly denoted on their plan.
Thank you, Aprella. Question, and I can handle this one. Is requirement to add outdoor dining structures to existing site plans a new requirement? This is something that has already been in place. It has always been the requirement that expanded outdoor dining permits and sidewalk cafe permits reflect accurately what is existing within those permits. Okay. Question for Marielle, if we can. Similar to what we just talked about, is there any, regarding the kind of individual use enclosures, things like that? Sorry, I just lost the question. How long should a server be inside igloos, things like that? Is there any sort of recommendations from the health department related to that?
Yeah, the answer would be for as short a period of time as possible. And of course, making sure that the server is reminding the diners that the mask should be up whenever the server is in the space, because people forget. And then trying to reduce the server interaction to under a total of 15 minutes would be the safest route. If any door is left open or if there is free ventilation, then, and as long as you're staying 6 feet away, then that time could be extended. But if you're in these smaller spaces, then I would try to limit the cumulative time to less than 15 minutes.
Thank you, Marielle. This next question is one that I can answer. It's not necessarily regarding outdoor dining. Questions about partitions. What are the rules about using partitions? If you have partitions such as plexiglass separating your booth or tables, can we sit each booth or table? Do we have to space them out? So if you're unable to space booths or tables indoors 6 feet apart, then you can use partitions, but they need to be truly impermeable barriers. And even with those in place, you still cannot go over that max capacity. So you need to kind of check all those different boxes. So if tables are stationary booths, for example, you can put up impermeable barriers between them, but you still need to be under 40% capacity if you're a restaurant. You still need to have 6 people or fewer, and you still need to have no more than 50 people within that space. Okay. Got a question regarding the city's competition for outdoor design solutions and who's paying for these structures. Now, this isn't this specific topic of this webinar, but happy to get you some more information about this if you reach out to us via email from the folks that know a little bit more about this. But there is a program that is being run by the Illinois Restaurant Association and funded through BMO Harris Bank to help provide some of these outdoor dining competition winners to restaurants. So it's not something that is being overseen by the city. Additionally, DoorDash has put $500,000 to give grants to restaurants to help them winterize, help them outdoors. Those actually just opened for application today. Again, not a specific topic up here, and I don't think anyone on here is an expert in those, but please send us an email to BACP Outreach, and we can get you more information there. I had a follow-up question, and I'm not sure, Aprella, if you have any insight into this. We got some questions specifically from private tent companies that are not taking on the liability of weight of snow on the tent after December 1st. And we apologize, I misunderstood your original question due to the below freezing temperature. So the city might be able to give out a tent until next spring, but tent companies are not taking on this liability. Is this something that you're aware of, Aprella? Is there any suggestions you have for people related to this?
I am not aware of that right now, but I'm sure that's something we'll have to look at because that could possibly be an issue structurally. So we'll look further into that, and I'll make sure I pose that with the powers that be, and we come up with some type of something on that to put out. Yeah, I'm sure they wouldn't take responsibility the tent companies, I don't see them doing that. So,
Great. So if you reach out, and as Apella said, you can look into that a little bit more. If you reach out to us via email, we can work on getting back to you there.
okay.
Yeah, this is Robert Steffens from Fire. One of our biggest concerns is inclement weather. A manager or somebody associated with the restaurant should be aware of the weather conditions. If it's extremely windy, we're in the midst of a blizzard, we have a thunderstorm, things of that nature, obviously these outdoor structures should not be in use. As far as the snow load on a tent, it should be removed as soon as possible. And that would probably fall under the liability of the restaurant that is using the tent. We don't want tents collapsing with people inside of them. We don't want tents blowing away with people inside of them, because that ends up becoming a EMS response and an operational duty for the fire department, because people can be injured. And so it's very important that during inclement weather, that these outdoor structures are monitored and they're not in use.
I agree with that. Each submittal, for those that are submitting for tent, they have to provide us with a high winds action plan. The code is very clear that at certain wind speeds, the tent contractor or owner, whoever's responsible, those tents have to be dismantled. They have to be taken down. They have to have listed on their high winds action plan a designated safety officer. They have to have their contact information to prevent exactly what you're referring to, Robert. So we're in total agreement. That is a part of that permit process. If they don't provide us with that information, that permit is not issued.
Thank you guys so much for that clarification. Robert, I apologize. This question had come through earlier. I missed it. Just a reminder to please use the chat function. There's both a chat and a Q&A, and the chat is the easiest one for us to be able to handle questions as they come through. Robert, can you just provide a little bit more clarification? And I know the answer might be it depends on the specifics, but a little bit more information on where and when propane would be allowed. I know we're saying that propane's not allowed in enclosed areas. Can you just provide a little bit more clarity on this? If an area has a roof above it but is otherwise open all around, can they have propane under there? Just want a little bit more clarification there.
Okay. I think it's going to be like on a case-by-case basis. We have somebody up on the northwest side that wants to put up a tent. He's keeping the 50% of the tent structure open, but they're going to use propane heaters to heat it. The propane is not going to actually be inside the tent. It's going to have the proper safety clearance from the tent. The actual heaters are going to be on the outside of the tent. So in that case, propane would be allowable to be used, but the lines or the hoses carrying the propane to these heaters and devices have to be protected. If there's no tents, canopies, they're just using their normal sidewalk cafe, and they have adequate clearances from their building, they can use the standalone propane heaters that we all see. But we always have a problem because these heaters tend to be expensive, and at the end of the day, people have a tendency of either moving these heaters inside the structure while they're closed, or removing the propane tanks or storing propane tanks inside of their main structure, which would not be allowed per the municipal code.
Great. So to clarify again, the recommendation would be, open uncovered areas with proper clearance. Any other thing that may have some more additional part there needs to be kind of approved on a case-by-case basis. Robert, can you provide a little more? You said sufficient clearance. If something is in an open and uncovered area, what is that length for sufficient clearance from any sort of structures?
Typically on the standard heaters that we see, it's a 10-foot clearance away from the structure, the main structure. So if you've got that 10-foot clearance, and I know some people don't have a 10-foot clearance, and we can be flexible to some degree. If they're 8 feet away, things of that nature. A lot of it does come down to the storage, making sure their employees understand that when they do change out a tank, that you're trained properly in either using a leak detector to verify that there's no leakage, or using just basically soapy water and put it on the connections and make sure that there's no leak in that system just by observing the bubbles from the soap. Propane is a very heavy gas. It tends to stay low to the ground compared to natural gas. Natural gas will dissipate very quickly because it's very light. It's actually lighter than air. Propane is heavier than air, so propane will stay low to the ground. And if you get enough buildup of propane, it could just be a car exhaust that ignites it. So, propane, even though it's a very useful tool, if it's not handled properly, it can be extremely dangerous.
Great, thank you for that, those points of clarification. We're getting close to the ending time. I know there were some questions we did not get to, and there are also some questions that we do need to provide a little bit more clarity. So I'll ask if you can again, we have our email here, bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. We understand that this year it's really more important than ever to be operating outside. And we do want to make sure that everybody is doing so safely and responsibly. We want to make sure that you can get outside, but we also want to make sure that you're doing it without putting your business, your customers, your employees at risk. So again, I want to urge all of you to continue being diligent in following the COVID-19 guidelines. As we said, and now Marielle's on obviously with the health department, we've had some worrying increases in cases over the last couple of weeks, and we want to make sure that you all continue to be diligent in following those. Again, we're here happy to answer questions, anything that you guys need. So I want to very much give a big thank you to Aprella, Marielle, Matt, Jen, Mike, and Robert that all joined from various different departments to help out today. This webinar has been recorded. If you have any more additional questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Thank you all very much.